Picard gets a love interest, a romantic interlude. Hey everybody, welcome to the Daily Book Series channel. I'm Christina, Kristina. Today we're talking about Captain's Holiday. We've done Sins of the Father, we've done Allegiance. Today we're doing Captain's Holiday. Next week we'll do Tin Man on Fridays. Friday is Star Trek Day. This is Disc 5, Season 3, Episode 167. Okay, so Captain's Holiday, Episode 167. There's no voiceover introduction at this point. The Vorgans go down to the planet and they're looking for Captain Picard, and he's not there yet. We go to the Enterprise, and they inform us that the captain's been away for 2 weeks with negotiations, and he comes back really tired. Deanna comes in first and tells Riker that it was successful negotiations, but the captain had little sleep and little to eat. So Deanna decides they know how to get the reluctant captain on a trip. I feel like we've skipped. So anyway, Riker was mentioning Risa, and they sit down and say that so Riker congratulates him on the trip, and Picard's like, and then he decides to go to his ready room. So after opening credits, we return and we're in the captain's ready room, and he looks like he's trying to catch up on work that he's missed for the past 2 weeks on the Enterprise. And Dr. Crusher comes in and says, "Sir, it's been brought to my attention that one of the crew is neglecting his health again." And Picard's working, and he's like, "Well, how so?" But Dr. Crusher says it's a classic case of stress-related ailments brought on by overwork, exhaustion, irritability, muscle spasms, yet he insists on ignoring. Picard said it doesn't sound too serious. Crusher says, "I plan on keeping it that way." Picard says, "What's the treatment?" Dr. Crusher says, "A week's shore leave." Picard says, "That's impossible." Dr. Crusher says, "Jean-Luc, I could make it an order." Picard says, "But you won't. Beverly, you know I loathe vacations." Dr. Crusher says, "I know you loathe going on vacations, but once you're there, you have a marvelous time. You told me that you loved the Fortes on Zyron 3. They were wonderful." Picard says, "I lied. Look, Enterprise is scheduled to spend a week undergoing maintenance overall at Starbase 12. While we're there, I promise I will make full use of the available recreation activity." Dr. Crusher says, "Watching some technician fill deuterium tanks is not my idea of fun." Picard says, suppose I could spend a few hours to spend on the holodeck." Dr. Crusher says, "Forget the holodeck. Isn't there someplace you want to go?" Picard says, "The Astronautics Center on Icor 9 is holding a symposium on rogue star clusters. I've given serious thought to attending." Dr. Crusher says, "That's the last thing you need is serious thought. Jean-Luc, why don't you go someplace beautiful where you can relax and be pampered? You deserve it." Dr. Picard says, "I'll give it serious thought." Dr. Crusher says, "Captain." Picard says, "Doctor, that's enough." Riker corners Picard in the turbo lift and pitches Risa. So they get on the bridge and Troy says, "I have some wonderful news." And Riker's like, "Really?" And Troy says, "There is an excellent chance that my mother may be joining us on Starbase 12. Picard says, "Your mother?" Troy says, "She's returning home from a conference on Akari 7 and she's going to try to rearrange her schedule so she can spend some time visiting us. Riker says, "That's wonderful!" Troy says, "She mentioned how much she's looking forward to meeting you again, Captain." Picard says, "Did she?" And then Picard says, "Commander, can I have a word with you in private?" So they go into the captain's ready room, and Riker asks if there's something wrong. And Picard says, "Tell me, number one, is the entire crew aware of this little shaming today to send me off on holiday?" And Riker says, "I believe there are 2 ensigns on deck 39 who don't know anything about it." Picard says, "This means can look forward to a week of continual harassment on this subject. I am feeling a little fatigued." So they're in the captain's quarters. I don't know why they have to be in the captain's quarters with him packing his luggage. But anyway, Riker asks him to bring back a souvenir, which gets Picard in a lot of trouble. Oh, and I should mention that Troy's a little miffed every time Riker mentions the women on Risa. So then the captain beams down to the planet, and all the women are like very scantily clad. What is this with sci-fi? Do sci-fi men need to see scantily clad ladies on other planets? Is that a draw for sci-fi? So Vash is walking down the hallway, whatever you want to call it, the entryway, and she walks into Picard. And behind Picard is the Ferengi that she's been dealing with, unknowns to everybody at this point. So to avoid the Ferengi, she kisses Picard. And Picard's like, "I don't know you." And she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Welcome to Risa." And Picard says, "You have mistaken me for someone else." And she says, "You might be right. Welcome to Risa," and walks away. And Picard says, "A simple handshake would suffice." Again, when this scene starts, they're showing a scantily clad lady from like here down, very slow camera. Then they pan over from her, they have a lady walking, and they do, "What is going on here, y'all?" And the poor captain, he's just trying to sit and get some sun and read his book. And these women keep coming up to Picard and propositioning him. And then after all that, the Ferengi comes up to him and Picard says, "You are blocking the sun." The Ferengi says, "I know you are working with her. I warn you, it's a mistake." Picard asks if he is addressing him. Ferengi says, "Don't bother to deny it. I have seen the two of you together." Picard says, "I don't know what the devil you are talking about, but whatever it is, I assure you it's no concern of mine." The Ferengi tells her, "I want the disc returned to me immediately." Picard says, "I have not made myself clear. You have the wrong man." Ferengi says, "I am rapidly losing patience with you. I demand you talk business." Picard says, You will find Ferengi demands carry little weight with me." The Ferengi says, "Obviously you have never dealt with my people before." Picard says, "On the contrary, all too often." Ferengi says, "Then you know the Ferengi are not to be trifled with." Picard says, "Or trusted." Ferengi says, "You dare to insult me." Picard closes his book and stands up. "I'd advise you to listen closely. I will not say this again. I came to Risa for holiday, nothing more. I have no knowledge of this woman or have set my eyes on a disc." Ferengi says, "You expect me to believe such feeble lies?" Picard says, "I don't care what you believe." The Ferengi says, "This is not overhuman. The disc is mine. So is that woman. Remember that." Picard sits down to relax again. So Vash comes back over to the captain because she saw him with the Ferengi. And Picard's been interrupted by these ladies because of the statue that Riker gave him all morning, and he's like so over it. And Picard says, "Oh, it's you." And Vash says, "Well, that's not much of a greeting." Picard says, "Look, I don't wish to be rude, but I am not interested in seeking Jahamagan. Vash says, all right, but you really should try it sometime. Picard says, if I try it, it will be of my own choosing. Vash says, that's fine with me. I wasn't offering you. Picard is caught off guard. I assume because of the way you welcomed me the other day. Vash says, I'm sorry if I embarrassed you. Picard says, I don't recall saying I was embarrassed. It's just that I prefer to be acquainted with the women that I kiss. Vash says, that's understandable. They introduce themselves. Vash says, so tell me about yourself, Jean-Luc. Oh, good grief. Picard says nothing. Vash says, would you rather I guess? She pushes down the book. I can be very persistent. Picard whispers, I am the captain of a Federation starship. Vash says, that explains it. Captain says, explains what? I noticed you arguing with the Ferengi. For a moment there it looked like it was going to come to blows. Picard figures out that you're the woman he was talking about. Vash says, I hope your disagreement wasn't over me. Picard says, for the information you will have to ask him. Picard is angry and gets up to leave. Ash says, where are you going? Picard says, to find some privacy. Vash says, what did he tell you? I bet there wasn't a bit of truth to it. And the Ferengi approaches and said, you didn't know her. Picard says, I don't and I don't want to. Ferengi says, return the disc to me and all will be forgiven. Vash says, the disc doesn't belong to you, Sovek. It never did. Picard says, it seems to me the two of you have a lot to discuss. You'll excuse me. Vash says, Jean-Luc, I'm sorry. Perhaps I could explain it all this to you later. And as she walks by him, she puts the disc in his pocket. Picard walks away. Ferengi says, I have a proposal that I believe you will find most interesting. Vash says, save your breath. The Ferengi says, I'm willing to pay you your weight in gold in exchange for the disc. Is that not a generous offer? Vash walks away. When Picard gets to his quarters, the Vorgons are there. They tell him, they introduce themselves as Azure and Baratus. Come on, where do they get these names from? Can't these people that write the sci-fi stuff think of better names? We come from the 27th century and we have traveled 300 years in the past to find you. Go to credits. All right, let's assume for the moment that I believe you, that you are indeed from the future. What it is that you want from me? Azure says, if he has heard, have you heard of the Toxut that? Picard says, what? I'm aware of the legend. It tells of a visitor from the future who left behind a mysterious device known as the Toxut. Azure says essentially the story is correct. Picard says then the UTAC actually exists. Baratus says yes, it was invented by a scientist named Cal Dano in the 27th century, and that the UAT is a quantum phase inhibitor, capable of halting all nuclear reaction within a star. Again, what's with the names of these planets and these places? Can't they just think of better names? They gotta make something sound foreign. Picard says, why bring such a powerful weapon to the past? Baratus says criminals attempted to steal the device, so he fled back to the 22nd century where he hid it. Azure and I were the security team assigned to retrieve the UTAT. Picard says, I gather you were unsuccessful. Borat says yes. We began to search through the historical records for some clue to UTAT's fate. Picard says, and your search led me to me. Azure says, we came about a brief account stating that you had discovered an object of unknown origin while vacationing in Risa. From its description, a crystal fitting into the palm of the hand, we surmised it could very well be the Toxut. Picard says, well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I haven't found anything including peace, which is the only thing I am looking for. Borat says, you will find such a device, Captain. To us, it is already part of history. Picard says, and if I find it, then what? Azure says, you will give it to us immediately, so we may return with it. Picard says, well, that belongs in your time frame, not mine. And they leave. And then Picard puts his hands in the pockets and finds the disc that Vash put in it. And the captain goes to Vash's quarters, and apparently it's been searched. And Picard holds up the disc and asks if this is what she is looking for. Vash says, I'm sorry, I had to hide it like that. I was afraid he'd start searching me next. Picard says the disk must contain some valuable information. Vash says, well, I doubt it's anything you'd be interested in. Picard says, depends. Vash says, on what? Picard says, on whether or not it has something to do with the talk she's at. Vax looks upset and wants to know if Sovek told that to Picard. Picard says, let's just say I've heard rumors that the U-Hat is located somewhere on Risa. Vash says, look, the last thing I need is a partner. Picard says, so it's true. Vash tells him to have a seat. I don't suppose you've ever heard of Professor Samuel Estergon. Picard says, yes, I have. He spent half his life searching for the Vorthak. I was his personal assistant for 5 years. Shortly before he died, he uncovered new data pinpointing its location, and the disk contains his research notes and maps. Picard says, and you are continuing his work. Vash says, exactly. Picard says, with the Ferengi as an associate? Vox says, so Sovek and I are definitely not working together. Picard says, but the two of you are very well acquainted. Vash says, well, at times he aided the professor in his explorations, especially in situations that weren't quite ethical. Picard says, and now the typical Ferengi, he's convinced that the Turax belongs to him. Vash says all he cares about is selling it to the highest bidder. Picard says, whereas you, of course, have nobler purpose in mind. Vash says, I told the professor I'd present it to Daystrom Institute for study. But first I have to find it, and that won't be easy with Sovek watching me every minute. Picard says, I'll go in your place. And Vash says, well, what about me? Picard says, you remain here, it's safe. Vash says, is that an order? Picard says, absolutely. Vash says, this isn't a starship, Jean-Luc. I don't follow orders. Picard says, oh, I see. Vash says, besides, you'd never find it without me. The professor's notes are in code. And there's some little flirting going on here. Picard says, I knew you were trouble the moment I met you. Vash says, you look like a man who could handle trouble. Picard says, so where exactly is the location? Vash says, about 27 kilometers due east. There are some subterranean caves. That's where you will find that U-Hat. Picard says, I'll meet you in the lobby in 15 minutes. And be punctual. Oh, and fast. Do change your clothing. Oh, good grief. Okay. It was pointed out to me that we've got a little Indiana Jones going on here with the outfits. So they're in the lobby. The Ferengi comes out behind the bushes. Hey, I caught you. He has a weapon. He holds them up. They have a little back and forth conversation. Vash takes her backpack, takes it off, pushes the Ferengi, pushes him down. Picard punches him. They throw away the weapon and they leave. So we get to the cave and we have lots of romantic conversation and flirting and other adult situations. So the next day they're in the cave where the U-Hat is, and the Ferengi have shown up and the Vorgans have shown up, and they're all watching Picard and Vash shovel for the item. And Picard decides to, after some time going through it and digging, he decides to quit. And the Vorgons are very disappointed and they disappear. And the Ferengi is in a panic, so he puts down his weapon and he takes up the shovels and he starts digging. Because Picard doesn't believe it's there anymore. So they get back to Vash's quarters, and Picard tries to be a little romantic. And she's like, oh, excuse me, I've had a long day. I'd rather not, blah, blah, blah. The big kiss off. The signals go off in his head. Oh, yeah, so the Enterprise comes back. And Picard says, I'll be ready to leave shortly, but please be ready to initiate transporter code 14. And everybody's like, what the hell is code 14? And they're like, all right, we'll stand by. And Riker's like, we didn't interrupt you doing anything, did we? Good grief. So she comes out all fancy schmancy dressed, leaving. And Picard calls her bluff and says, the only reason you went to that cave was because you already knew, you already had it. You just wanted the Ferengi to think it wasn't there so you could get away scot clean. So where did you hide it? What did you do with it? So she shows Picard that it was hidden in one of the statues. So then after Vash confesses all to Picard about selling it to the Daystrom to get some profit, the Vorags show up and they're like, give it. And Vash is like, how do you know they are who they say they are? So Picard puts the thing on the ground, calls Riker to do the thing 14, and the little stone thing is totally destroyed. And then everybody goes home, and back on the Enterprise. Oh wait, I forgot. We had some last minute flirting going on about what she's going to be doing next. And then we are back on the Enterprise, and Picard says, we are going to have to talk about that Hobergon or whatever the hell it was that Riker kept telling him to get. Because that put Picard in a whole lot of trouble. So, everybody, I hope you enjoyed today's little Captain's Holiday. And please give the thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Let me know and I'm doing a good job. I'm just watching Star Trek, talking Star Trek, reading books, talking books. I'm trying to do my best here. Please like and subscribe, show your support. Thank you.